Sun Quan's newly appointed frontline commander, Lu Meng, was a competent military leader. He shared in the fact that he and Jiang Xin had both been urged to study by Sun Quan over the last few years. Lu Meng had been making preparations for war at Ruxu at the same time, and remained vigilant to counterattacks ever since Wu's earlier victory here in 213. The important dock at Ruxu was still being protected by a fort, and the city had been continuously strengthened and expanded. Also, the transportation and retreat routes were always left open on Lu Meng's orders, as he knew that they'd eventually be needed. Ever since Zhang Liao's committed defense repelled Sun Quan's invasion at Hefei Fortress, Cao Cao had also been making preparations, but for an offensive. He designated Hefei as his frontline base, then ordered many soldiers and generals to gather to Zhang Liao's domain. Acting General of Valiant Cavalry Cao Ren arrived, while Zhang Ba and Sun Quan also brought the Xingzhou Corps into the area. Arriving with Xie Hadun from Hanzhong, Cao Cao passed by Hefei and stopped off to visit the site of the Battle of Xiaoyao Ford. After a long time in reflection at this location, he increased Zhang Liao's troop size and relocated his garrison to Juchao. The estimated 400,000 soldiers here were divided into units of around 12,500 men each. Sun Quan led 70,000 men to Ruxu's defense, but left the battle plans and command over them to Lu Meng. Jiang Xin was assigned as admiral over the navy, and together they held the responsibility for military discipline. Dongxi was appointed as the captain of a 5-story warship and sent to defend the major water entrance to Ruxu, while Zhou Tai, Xu Sheng, Xu Ran and Ling Tong also participated. Ning led the 3,000-strong vanguard unit, but Sun Quan also gave him a secret order to attack Cao Cao's main camp under the cover of night. Ning selected 100 elite soldiers for his mission, then Sun Quan sent food and wine to honour them. Before the battle, Ning poured wine into silver bowls, then drank 2 before offering another to an officer. He knelt down in submission and didn't dare to take even a sip, so Ning drew his sword and placed it on his lap. "You respect our lord, but not me. Remember, if I don't fear death, then you have no reason to fear death." The officer saw that Ning was stern about this issue, so he submitted and drank. Then each soldier drank 1 bowl of wine. Cao Cao launched his attack onto Ruxu with possibly 80 to 100,000 men, while Xie Hadun was left behind to stand guard at Juchao with the remaining 26 units. Zhang Liao and Zhang Ba both led the vanguard, but it was a furious campaign of grueling battles. When the attackers pressed on Ruxu Fort itself, Lu Meng's defences held out for several weeks. It was only when the spring floods came that Cao Cao's optimism about capturing Ruxu receded. Zhang Liao's and Zhang Ba's march was slowed by the rainfall until the water level rose and Jiang Qin's ships were able to approach them. When Sun Quan attacked the Wu fortress, he was caught in a hail of arrows, but despite being wounded, he continued to fight fiercely. His brave death was a development that Cao Cao had not expected. General Quan was gravely wounded, yet still his spirit burned bright, and he fought with all of his strength. He certainly deserves to be honoured by the state. The remaining vanguard soldiers became uneasy about continuing the march, and Zhang Liao agreed with them to retreat, but Zhang Ba told them all to wait instead. "Cao is clear-sighted and wise. He will not simply abandon us. Isn't it better to wait for his decision?" Indeed, the next day an official order arrived for them to return, and both generals retreated to safety. When Zhang Liao made his report to Cao Cao, he was greatly impressed with his good judgment, but also impressed with Zhang Ba's display of loyalty towards him. Cao Cao temporarily halted his attack in order to prepare for a long-term war. He ordered Xie Hadun to lead his 26 armies from Juchao to the front line, then set up numerous camps along the river. Sun Quan faced off against the ever-growing number of enemy troops. He ordered his most formidable officers like Ling Tong and Xu Sheng to maintain a line of defense which Cao Cao was unable to breach. Xu Ran had never been given any responsibility until now, so proved his loyalty by independently going to the front lines to help his allies. Although he didn't engage the enemy in battle on this occasion, his actions were still recognised by Sun Quan all the same. A heavy storm broke out one night, which threatened to capsize Dongxi's warship. When his marines boarded the smaller lifeboats, they pleaded for him to join them, to which he sternly replied, "I've received my order to defend this position from the enemy, so how can I just abandon my post due to a storm? If anyone dares speak of this again, it will be met with execution." Dongxi dutifully remained alone on his ship until it sank, and brought him down with it. Wu claimed a great victory one evening when it was nearly midnight. Under the cover of darkness, Ning and his 100 men raided Cao Cao's main camp. They laid waste to it, destroyed some defensive structures and killed dozens of enemy soldiers. They disrupted the chain of command, which threw Cao's other camps into confusion. The shocked guards eventually sounded the alarms and lit the camp up with torchlight, but by that time, Ning had already returned to his own camp. His 100 beat the drums and blew their own horns in celebration as they shouted a phrase meaning, "Long live." It's claimed not a single man was lost in the mission, and the ensuing demoralization and embarrassment of Cao Cao is what made him leave the battlefield. Later that night, Ning was summoned to meet the delighted Sun Quan. "Were your actions enough to frighten the old man? I even had the chance to see your valor. I can rival and match him. Meng De may have Zhang Liao, but I have Ning." Even after Cao Cao was forced to withdraw, the battle remained incomplete, as most of his army was still intact. He left Xie Hadun behind, just north of Sun Quan's position as area commander over 26 Juns. This huge force was simply too large and too well entrenched to be driven away, which turned the Battle of Ruxukou into a stalemate. So long as Sun Quan kept his army in Rushu, Xie Hadun could not hope to invade him, but as soon as he pulled out, then Xie Hao could break through. Neither side thought they could win without great losses, so they settled on a truce instead. Sun Quan recognized Cao Cao as king and the legitimate representative of the Han. They formed an uneasy alliance with an official surrender, but Cao Cao knew that Sun would not be content being treated as a subject. Quan was allowed to continue his independent rule over the south, as all of his military options regarding the north were now exhausted. He became one of Cao Cao's subordinates, for now.